Hello and welcome to the course Developing Soft Skills and Leadership through Indian Knowledge System. In today's lecture, we shall reflect upon and deeply discuss the concept of Sangha and collective responsibility. If we quickly look at the very origin of the term, what we call Sangha, we find that Sangha has origin in Buddhist thought, right, which means community or assembly. Primarily, this is reflecting and referring to the monastic community of monks and nuns, and more broadly to all practitioners of what you call Buddha's teachings. So, we know that this term called Sangha has its origin in Buddhist thought, and Buddhist monastic order is traditionally composed of four groups. We know monks, nuns, laymen and laywomen. This Sangha originated in this particular group of disciples who renounced the worldly life to wander with the Buddha and listen to his teachings. After the Buddha's death, his disciples and disciples continued to live together as a community, wandering from place to place, living off the receipt of alms. So, this Sangha continued even after the Buddhas. In the modern times, the modern Sangha is governed by disciplinary rules, that is Vinaya, that form what you call part of sacred canon. So, we have an idea that this concept called Sangha or the term Sangha has its origin in Buddhist thought and is continuing even today. If we look at the conceptual foundations of Sangha and collective responsibility, we find that, and if we closely analyze the Buddhist idea of Sangha, we find that it is a structured and value oriented community of the disciples originally, and then it continued in the same form, bound by shared ethical principles. So, if you look at the Sangha and the kind of relationship that is prevailing in Sangha is quite based on what you call shared ethical principles, and there is a mutual cooperation amongst the community of, or what you call the Sangha, and there is a common purpose, right. And if you look at in the Buddhist context, the common purpose may be to achieve salvation and to get moksha, right, and that can be extended to modern concept of Sangha as well. We will discuss it in detail. So, what we find in the Buddhist thought that the Sangha is sustained through certain kind of rules, procedures and collective discipline that support harmonious living and ethical growth. In modern social thought, it may also be understood as a community whose authority emerges from shared norms, legitimacy and moral participation, right. So, what has to be emphasized here in this understanding of Buddhist thought of Sangha, we find that this Sangha is sustained through what we call rules and procedures and collective discipline. We find that Sangha may exist without having one particular dominant figure. Rather, it is a very shared and collective group where the rules are important, right, and they have a common purpose, and that is living harmoniously and bringing about an ethical growth. This can be extended to understanding of modern social thought because it can be understood as a community of people whose authority emerges from shared norms. Rather than individual authority, it is based on shared norms, legitimacy and moral participation. This is precisely at the core of the entire idea of Sangha. It is a collective group, it is not based on individual preferences. So, collective responsibility is highlighted, whereas it signifies the shared obligation of individuals to act in ways that sustain social harmony, right. So, what happens is that individual acts, and a particular individual is not free to act the way he or she wants, right. Rather, he has certain obligations to work within a particular rules, because the individual acts are always associated with collective welfare or collective results, and that is why the individual acts should be understood in terms of sustaining social harmony and uphold dharma, and they must contribute to the well-being of the whole. That means individual actions are not being seen as isolated, rather individual actions are very much rooted in what you call relation with social harmony, dharma, and the well-being of the entire world. Therefore, there must be a sync, there must be a close relationship between individual acts and the collective well-being. In Indian thought, we find that responsibility is not merely individual. This is precisely what I just highlighted, that responsibility is not individual, it is always relational. Means whatever you are doing, whatever is your responsibility, it's not, you are not accountable to yourself only, but it's relational. It's grounded in mutual support, interdependence. Right? You are not independent, rather there is an interdependency, and there is always a concern for what you call collective well-being. Right? So, we are not existing alone, right, in an isolated place, isolated world. We are all social beings. So, whatever acts we are performing, they have a social orientation or a purpose, or they have social consequences, and therefore there must be a Sangha where every individual performs his or her responsibility in relation with a particular rules and regulations which are always oriented towards what you call the collective well-being of the entire society. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna has been emphasizing this particular fact. Devan bhavetanen tatte deva bhavantu va parasparam bhavyanta shreya param vapasyat. That means you should learn from celestial gods, right, and how there should be a kind of a relationship between, there is a relationship between gods, right, and if human beings and gods cooperate, probably we can bring about prosperity for each and every one, right. So that means your goals, your relations have certain kind of values, right, and certain kind of results, certain kind of consequences, and your acts must responsibly be orienting towards those particular kinds of social results. If we try to understand Sangha and its collective responsibility in Indian knowledge system, we have just been referring to the concepts of how it has been highlighted in Buddhist monastic traditions. We find that in Indian knowledge system, the Sangha is always viewed as interconnected, or in fact the entire society is viewed as interconnected whole, right. That means individual does not exist in isolation, but each and every one living in society, there is a kind of an interconnection between amongst all, right. And what is expected out of this interconnection whole is cooperation, mutual respect, and shared duties. So, the entire society sustains harmoniously based on these ideas of cooperation, mutual respect, and shared duties, right. So, if we closely analyze that in order to be social and to exist in society, we must practice the ideas such as cooperation, mutual respect, and shared duties. This has been exhibited by many figures, dominant and prominent figures in Indian knowledge system, where they have embodying their life as cooperation, mutual respect, and shared duties. And this collectively is what we are expecting out of a Sangha. So, Sangha aptly represents this particular unity in diversity, right, while collective responsibility ensures that actions contribute to the welfare of all, that is lokasangraha, right. So, what we are looking at here is that Sangha is a kind of a collection of people which might come from diverse backgrounds, their linguistic identity, their regional identity, their caste identity, and other kinds of identities may differ, but then within the Sangha they represent that kind of diverse, unity in diversity. Why? Because they have a collective responsibility, right, and that collective responsibility is towards contributing to the welfare of all, or lokasangraha. So, that means you must reach to that kind of, avoid any kind of conflict, and Sangha is based on not what you call conflict, but cooperation, right, cooperation in order to establish the idea of what we call lokasangraha. These things highlight what you call moral obligations on individuals to act in a particular way, because and that is to uphold dharma, because their conscious participation in maintaining social harmony and justice. In order to maintain what we call social harmony and justice, so there is an obligation of on individual that he or she must uphold dharma, he must act according to the dharma, because that is going to result in what we call maintaining social harmony and justice. Now, if we look at the philosophical basis of Sangha in Indian thought, we find that there is reference existing as old as in Rig Veda, where it is said that sangat shadvam samvadadvam samvo manasi jantam. That means we have a kind of a reference out of which we can derive this particular idea that Sangha has been propagated in ancient Indian thought, which is talking about a kind of vision of collective harmony, or what you call Sangha, right. What has been talked about in this particular, or what we can infer out of this particular shloka is, let's move together, let's speak together, let your minds be in harmony. So it is emphasizing the fact that let's bring about some kind of harmony within a particular Sangha, or what you call a team or a collective. And that how can that be done? When you bring about a consensus, right, when moving together, speaking together, and let your mind be in harmony. So if you look at the insights that we can derive from this shloka is the idea of dialogue and communication, right. How can we bring about harmony in a particular Sangha is by practicing what we call dialogue and communication, where the communication is always an open discussion which leads to clarity and stronger decisions, right. So everything has to be collectively decided, right, and that consensus should be reached based on what you call open discussion, and because open discussion would establish the clarity and stronger decisions. And there must be an unity of thought within a Sangha. That means there must be shared vision that enhances effectiveness and execution, and there must be an inclusive participation. That means every voice from each and every background must be included, because this inclusive participation would contribute to collective wisdom, right. And there are chances that your consensus and your ultimate the result or the consequences or harmony would not be biased. And there must be a shared responsibility in a Sangha, because the decisions and outcomes belong to the entire group, and therefore responsibilities cannot be invested in one particular person, rather than responsibilities must be shared. This is precisely what we learn, that is, we must establish dialogue and communication, there must be unity of thought, and there must be inclusive participation and shared responsibility in a Sangha. When we look at Buddhist Sangha, that is a kind of an ethical community. It is said in Dhammapada, that is Sukha Sanghasya Samaggi Samagyanam Tapo Sukho. That means harmony in the Sangha is happiness. United effort brings peace, right. So what we learn from this Buddhist idea that there must be unity within a particular community, because unity in the community is the foundation of ethical living, and there must be collective discipline, because that strengthens individual practice. Collective discipline must be practiced, right, and there must be harmony, because harmony ensures stability and moral growth. When we look at the concept of Sangha, this is a kind of an institutionalized collective ethics that is practiced in Sangha, again in Buddhist ideas. What it said in Dhammapada is, na bhaje papakam mitram, na bhaje parisadhamam, bhajet mitre kalyane, bhajet puri suttame. That means do not associate with the unholy, unwholesome or ignoble. Associate with the virtuous and the wise. So it completely, what is being prescribed here is that you must associate yourself with the people or the collective who are good and virtuous and wise, because it is your company which decides your fate your conduct and your character, right. So, you should make sure that your friends are not ignoble, rather virtuous and wise. So, the kind of insights that we derive from this shloka from Dhammapada is that Sangha is one of the three jewels or Trinetra, that is Buddha and Dhamma, and it ensures collective discipline, peer accountability and ethical concerns through community. And there is no single figure which is monopolizing the power. Instead, ethical authority is discussed across the Sangha, preventing any kind of misuse of leadership, right. So, that means you should always be investing in good people, right, and the collective of good people would collectively decide or take ethical authority rather than investing any kind of authority with one particular person, right. Because if you invest authority in one particular person and the person is ignoble, probably the entire Sangha is going to be destroyed. Now, we can also derive some inferences from Guru Granth Sahib, that is where he has been focusing on this idea of power of sangat, or what we call collective. And what he means is that if you remain in good company, you are uplifted, you become better, right. And that is why what he says is sangat mili rahe so tare. So, tare here means like uplifted or achieves moksha, right, and it completely depends upon the kind of company that you keep, right. So, that means you should always associate, or your association or with whom you are living in, that collectively shapes your moral behavior. That means if you are living with good people, your moral behavior is shaped accordingly. If you live with bad people, ignoble people, your moral behavior would be shaped by that. So, it is your sangat, it is your sangha which decides what kind of character you are going to build. And similarly, if you look around yourself, it is a collective environment which influences what you call individual growth. So, your growth, individual growth is not what you call always isolated, but your individual growth is contextualized in what you call the environment that you live in. And if your environment around you is good, or you are surrounded by good people, good examples, or moral and ethical people, then probably your individual growth would be decided accordingly. It also focuses on the idea of ethical communities, because if you are living in an ethical community, or what you call Sangha, probably it would foster the responsible individuals, right. Therefore, Sangat is the one. There is one particular unique quality that you find in Sangat is that Sangat, as we have already seen, is very inclusive in nature. That means it always dissolves any kind of hierarchies of caste, status and power, and it fosters the idea of equality and shared responsibility amongst all members. So, Sangha or Sangat is very inclusive in nature in Indian context, because when there is a Sangha or Sangat, it does not practice any kind of hierarchies of caste, status or what you call power. Rather, its focus is always on the idea of equality and shared responsibility amongst all members. And this is particularly we find in Sikh tradition, or what you call Guru Granth Sahib, where any kind of hierarchies are completely dissolved. We also find some inferences of collective responsibility towards welfare in Bhagavad Gita, where we have multiple times highlighted this concept of lokasangraha, which is a kind of welfare of all, right. And what he says is lokasangraha mevapi sampashya anka tu maharsi. That means act with a view of the welfare of the entire world, right. So, this lokasangraha is positioned in Gita as welfare and stability of all as a core responsibility of action within a particular Sangha. So, Sangha always performs each and every kind of action within keeping in mind the welfare and stability of all, because Sangha is a collective of individuals, right, coming from various backgrounds, and the action of Sangha is not oriented towards the individual, one particular individual or individual reality, but it is a shared responsibility of action for the welfare of all beings in the world. And the kind of actions that are taken in Sangha are always directed towards, as I have said, collective welfare, collective well-being and stability of all. And therefore, this Sangha extends beyond what you call personal duty to social responsibility. Any individual within a Sangha or any leadership within a Sangha is not directed towards what you call personal duty, but social responsibility, right. The shift is from individuality to what you call collective being, and therefore individual efforts contribute to societal stability. Individuals working in that particular Sangha bring about what you call societal stability. We also find a reference of Sangha or collective responsibility as a universal ethic in Upanishads, particularly if you look at the Maha Upanishad, which has been focusing on this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where it is said, Ayam nija paroveti gadana laguchetsam udara charitanam tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right, where it is focused that you should rise above the idea of individuality and individual gains and material prosperity, but rather you should always extend yourself, your thinking and your position to think that the entire world is one particular family, one family. So, it says this is mine, this is yours. Such thinking is of the narrow minded, or for the noble people the entire world seems to be a family. And as we have already know that Sangha is a collective of what you call noble being, and therefore what is prescribed here is that the entire world should be seen as one particular family. And the kind of things that we derive from this idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam from Maha Upanishad is the universal responsibility, that your responsibility extends beyond yourself to the entire world. Means the kind of acts that you are performing, that you are envisioning, is not related to your individual self, but you are accountable to the entire world, right. You have responsibility towards the entire world. It is a social responsibility, a larger responsibility. It also focuses on the idea of ethical inclusivity, because all members of society are part of a shared moral framework, right. So, there is an ethical inclusivity of all members, and there is also a shared human accountability, because every individual contributes to the harmony of larger whole. That means you have a shared accountability of contributing towards what you call a larger world. So, you should ever, what it means that you should rise above your individual thinking of material prosperity and material gain and individual growth. Rather, you should always associate your individual growth with a larger reality of thinking about the entire world as one family. We find in Bhagavad Gita once again that there is a concept called collective responsibility as an interconnected web. So, your collective responsibility is always connected with many sources. What it says is that Devan bhavetanen te deva bhaventuva parasparam bhaventa shreya param vapasyat. So, nourish one another, and through mutual support you shall attain the highest good. So, if you are thinking about the other people, you are supporting the other people and bringing about a mutual support, then probably you are going to attain the highest good, the growth and individual of the higher number of people, right. So, what we see is that responsibility is not isolated and it is rather interconnected across individuals, right. So, we know that each and every individual in a particular society is interdependent on each other. So, we are living in a society which is a larger form of what we call Sangha, where there is an interconnection across individuals. We know that there is a collective well-being which depends on each member, right. So, your collective well-being cannot be achieved by one particular person, it is a collective effort, and therefore, neglect of one may affect the entire system. So, make sure that not even a single person is neglected, and he must also be included in a collective growth, and therefore, no action should exist in isolation, rather responsibility is always distributed. No one should practice any kind of an action in isolation, rather they must responsibly be working in order to ensure the growth of each and everyone in society. So, if we try to reimagine the leadership through the concept of Sangha and collective responsibility, we find that modern leadership always increasingly derives credibility not from position, but from collective trust and shared validation, right. So, similar to Sangha based authority. In Sangha, the authority is always delegated within the particular Sangha, right. So, it is not the individual which is important, rather the collective authority is important. Similarly, modern leadership is also trying to derive the credibility not from one particular position of power and privilege, but from collective trust and shared validation. And if you look at effective leaders, they always harness group wisdom, diverse perspectives and dialogue engagement, reflecting Sangha's emphasis on deliberation. We know that Sangha performs through the idea of deliberation and discussion. Any kind of action or any kind of decision that has to be taken within a Sangha, first of all must undergo a deep deliberation and discussion. So, in a similar manner, effective leaders in the modern times are aware about this particular fact, and that is why they always reach to a particular consensus and what you call decision by discussing deeply or engaging deeply in what you call diverse perspectives, dialogue, engagement and harnessing group wisdom. Similarly, we find that the best organizations always embed shared responsibility, and because shared responsibility would always be responding better to any kind of crisis, right. And that is why just Sangha thrives on mutual trust. Modern leadership also depends on credibility, cooperation and shared commitment. So, what we find is that any kind of what you call modern leadership or being effective modern leader may derive certain kind of wisdom, certain kind of inferences from Indian thought, which has been talking about the collective authority, delegation of authority within that particular thing, particular Sangha, focusing on deliberation, right, and shared responsibility and mutual trust. If we look at the educational implications of Sangha and collective responsibility, if Sangha has been a kind of practice in learning, because learning is always a collective process, right. So, it shifts in education from individual competition to collaborative learning. What we learn in an education system or the pedagogical implication of Sangha is that learning, for instance, is not an individual process, right, or education is not an individual competition and process, rather a collaborative learning or what you call a collective learning, or it is a collective process. So, classroom should be looked at as a Sangha, because it becomes what you call ethical and participatory space which fosters mutual respect and shared growth. So, classroom in the modern times can be transformed through the idea of Sangha as a collective space where ethical and participatory learning based on mutual respect and shared growth happens. Similarly, shared responsibility in learning outcomes, promoting accountability and engagement can also be derived from the idea of Sangha and collective responsibility. Teachers' role will be seen from the perspective of Sangha as a shift from authority to guide and co-learner, nurturing a collaborative environment, right. So, a teacher becomes what you call not a guide, but a co-learner and nurturing a collaborative environment. So, in conclusion, what we have learned today is that Sangha and collective responsibility may be reimagining leadership as a shared ethical practice where authority emerges from collective trust and participation rather than individual power. So, we are learning that leader is not an individual always having individual power and privilege, but leadership can be participatory and shared ethical practice, right. So, leadership is not always individual, but it can also be a shared practice, right. This is precisely what we have learned. So, the entire Sangha may be the leader, and the entire authority of leadership may be delegated in the entire community, or what we call collective, and they emphasize that true leadership lies in harmonizing individual actions with larger good, ensuring that decisions are inclusive, responsible and socially grounded. So, this kind of Sangha leadership may be about the larger good, right, because it would bring about the kind of decisions which are quite inclusive, responsible and socially grounded, and there is less chance that they are prejudiced and biased. So, what we have learned is that leadership in this particular context is not imposed, but co-created through dialogue or discussion and deliberation, mutual accountability and shared purpose. This fosters both personal integrity and collective well-being, right. So, we know that the leadership is practiced within a Sangha with deliberation, dialogue and discussion and mutual accountability and shared purpose. They are at the crux of what you call the entire idea of Sangha. So, Sangha becomes more important than the individual being. Sangha can be the leader collectively, or what you call exhibiting the idea of shared ethical practice of what you call leadership. Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed today's lecture. In case you have any doubt or questions and queries, kindly let me know. Thank you.